So I'm just delivering the welcome address and a presidential address to this uh, meeting. First of all, welcome to all the speakers here who accepted our invitation and who uh, joined with us on this day. So, as the title suggests, it's declaring March 16th as the International Day for Exposing Islamophobia and Combating Muslimophobia. And I hope from next year onwards, what we are expecting is that we will be observing this date, that is March 16th, as an important day in the as a milestone event in the history of ex-Muslims movement, that it will be observed as an international day for exposing Islamophobia. I think there's a feedback coming from. Okay, so let's go ahead. So there are two reasons why we had to organize this meeting today. But to tell you the truth, to be frank, there was only one reason at the beginning, and that was the death anniversary of our closest friend, Mr. Farooq H. from Coimbatore. He's no more. He was hacked to death on 16th March of 2017 in Coimbatore, a city in Kerala, a city in Tamil Nadu. And he was killed by the Islamists. And we used to observe his death anniversary every year. And we used to remember how these kind of incidents are happening in our world, especially in our country. Even though it happens, we know that such incidents happen in other parts of the world where Islam is having an upper hand, like whether it be Pakistan or in other countries like Syria or Iran or some other countries like Afghanistan. But when you talk about such incidents happening in a country like India, that is something which we have to look further beyond. So that was the only reason we had to organize such an event. But just before announcing this event, another thing happened, and that was a resolution taken by the UN General Assembly, which was done on March 15th. It was moved by the Pakistan government, and the representative from Pakistan, they produced this paper, and that was accepted in the 76th session of the General Assembly. And the March 15th was announced as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. And the reason they cite for taking such a move is that they are saying that Islamophobia has emerged. That's what is written in that paper as published in the UN website. Islamophobia has emerged as a new form of racism that includes, among others, discriminatory travel bans, hate speech, and the targeting of girls and women for their dress. So that's the text that is given there. So just focus on some words that is mentioned there. One is racism. And the other things like, among others, discriminatory travel bans, hate speech, and the targeting of girls and women. So just imagine how the UN, the body called UN, which is supposed to be the peacekeeping and a very important international organization, taking such a matter at their hands and giving out such very childish reasons and such kind of arguments for putting forward a great day like a day for combating Islamophobia. So it was actually a saddening event, saddening resolution for me. But being an optimist or being a bloody optimist, I see this event or I see this resolution as an opportunity to educate people, to gain more events or to organize more events and arrange more awareness among the people to discuss, to contemplate, and to get a good idea about all these things. What Islamophobia is, what Muslimophobia is, what Jewophobia is, what Christianophobia is. All such phobias has to be discussed. And above all, this is the right moment even to discuss about what phobia is. Because the word phobia itself is something which is misunderstood in a lot of ways. So, as our title says, exposing Islamophobia and combating Muslimophobia, we need a disambiguation of both. That's what is required today. And it's not an easy task, it's a very difficult task, as I understand. Especially when international bodies like UN and other organizations, maybe some other organizations will be coming in the future, in the coming days. And they are also taking such stands where it's made more difficult to make a clarity, to contrast between Islamophobia and Muslimophobia. So one event which comes to my mind while speaking about this is the stabbing of Sheikh Uthman ibn Farooq, which was much talked about in the international YouTube media and all others. Even I have seen some videos made by Harris and Apostate Prophet and many other people. So that's a classical example of how this Islamophobia and Muslimophobia can be taken up. So there are multiple ways how we can expose Islam. And we can say that fearing Islam is something which is required, and it is something which is for a reason that we are doing. It's not a phobia. It's a fear in reality. So there's a reason for it. It's a rational fear. So when we call it as a phobia, it is something irrational. But if we say that secularism or democracy is that something which we are aiming for, I see this move by the UN and some other countries, like even in India, which we are seeing here. And the reason why we, especially Hina and myself and all other my counterparts from this part of the world, we are trying to to uphold our rights and to live as a human in this secular and democratic country. And there's no difference between the situations which we are facing here when compared to an Arab country or an Islamic country. It's almost similar. It's getting similar at times. So the stabbing of Sheikh Uthman clearly gives us a classical example of how the fear of Islam is turning out to be something like hating Muslims, and to take the dagger and pulling it or doing such activities, which we saw even before. So we have to stop this, and I think it's bound upon us to, as ex-Muslims, to voice about this, to make it clear, and to do something which can stop the whole Muslim bigotry, and at the same time to expose the fearsome factors or the fear factors which is inherent in Islam. So when the UN says that it is racism that is more that as the reason, as the most important reason for declaring such a day, I have to say that even UN is getting confused between what is racism and what is bigotry. So that's what I'm I'm getting an idea like that. So I think we have to write more on this and to jam their mailboxes with clarifications, to make them understand, to make them look for what the real things are to be. So Islam is not a race, but bigotry is existent, and we have to talk against that. So I'm giving a short glossary. We have to talk about Islam, we have to talk about Muslims, we have to talk about Islamophobia, we have to talk about Muslimophobia, Jews and Christian phobia, Jewophobia, converts and reverts, phobia, fear, rationality, anxiety disorder. These are the things, these are the words which mix us up the whole idea, and even the UN is getting confused about all the bigger issues like this. So if anyone listening to this, especially the UN, requires a reason or an evidence why I'm saying this or why we are saying this, there's an evidence from Quran itself. The chapter 8 and verse 12. It says, when the Lord inspired the angels, saying, I am with you, so make those who believe stand firm. I will throw fear into the hearts of those who disbelieve, then smite the necks and smite off them each finger. So just read through the lines. The God or the Allah is saying that I am instilling fear into the minds of the disbelievers or infidels like us or the murtads like us, ex-Muslims like us. So if we are having a fear about Islam, it's their duty or it's the duty of the Islam is to make it clear whether that fear which is in us is from Allah or not Allah. So now they have to make it clear. So that's uh, it's going to be a big problem for them to make it clear. I don't know how they are going to do it. Anyway, the problem is getting more harder for them. And the thing is, if phobia is, as per definition, is something called irrational fear, we can say that Islamic phobia, everything, if it is Islamic, it becomes a paradox. So in that case, Islamic phobia means it's a rational fear. That's how things are now. So phobia is now almost like a reality. People are talking like that, and it is getting normalized. And that's the exactly the same the way how Islam normalizes things in a way that people are forced to take things. The way women are dealt with, the children are dealt with, or many other things. Even now, we are asked to deal with phobia in an Islamic manner, and we are asked to follow or we are asked to take that as a rational thing, apart from not like an anxiety disorder or something which is we usually call a phobia. So we know Islam is the problem, and we have a reason to fear Islam. But for loving Muslims, we need not look for a reason. They are human beings. And we should, I think it's our duty to always say that Muslims are the first victims of Islam. And we need to keep on saying that. And we need to give this idea first to the Muslims themselves that we are not against them. Especially when I'm coming from India, where the right wing politics, the Hindutva, they are targeting Muslims, and they are. It's written in their books, like as we have seen in our kitabs, like in Quran, etc. Muslims are the enemies. That's how they are teaching the Hindutva uh, ideology, as per Hindutva ideology. So they are against Muslims, the persons, the people. So even my 1-year-old child is a dangerous human being, as per their definition. How can that be justified? I don't think whether they will be able to understand how this works. So it's very clear that Hindutva, even when we talk about any other right-wing ideologies, this is becoming more harder. And the moves taken by the UN body, the bodies like UN, it's making it further hard for us to make it. The disambiguation is getting harder. So this is the whole idea or the whole thing which I have to give as an introduction, as an address. So I thank everyone here, and I'm not giving a elaborate introduction of all the speakers now, because I think I can do it one by one when I try to call upon each one of you for yours for when I want to hear from you. I think we can move forward. So once again, I welcome all the speakers and all the listeners, our viewers, and all our friends who are supporting us, who made all these things happen. And I think we can move forward. Thank you so much. Bye. So now I welcome for the inaugural address Maryam Namazie. So I don't think she requires a much introduction, but still, I will give an abridged form of introduction because to read all about her itself will take 5 minutes. So I think uh, she's well known to the ex-Muslims. If I say about her, Maryam Namazie and the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain and the ex-Muslims of India. These two things, these two organizations were the inspirations or were the reasons why the non-religious citizens and the ex-Muslims of Kerala was uh, taking shape back in 2019. So at first it was an online group, and later on it spread out whole in our state, and it's now a registered organization, and we are working harder to make all these things happen. So first of all, I would like to give a big thanks to Inspire for inspiring us for taking such a big leap. So Maryam is the co-founder of this Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain. She's an Iranian-born writer and activist, spokesperson for One Law for All, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, and Fitna. She is a member of the International Advisory Board of the Raif Badawi Foundation for Freedom, a member of the International Advisory Board of Feminist Dissent, a patron of London Black Atheists and Pink Triangle Trust, a National Secular Society Honorary Associate, a Humanist Laureate at the International Academy of Humanism, an Honorary Associate of Rationalists International, an Emeritus member of the Secular Humanist League of Brazil, and finally a columnist for the Freethinker. So welcome, Maryam.
Thank you very much, Arif. It's such a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to the non-religious citizens and ex-Muslims of Kerala for organizing this event and for having me here amongst you amazing, brilliant, wonderful people. So I'm really pleased to be here and to be able to contribute to this discussion. As Arif mentioned, March 15th was recognized by the UN as the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, and it was initiated by the Pakistani government on behalf of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. And this day, March 15, marks the day that Christian rights, white supremacist gunmen attacked 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, which resulted in the death of 51 people in these mosques. And of course, this is an act of outrage. It's a terrorist act by a Christian right movement. But I guess the question that needs to be asked here is whether strengthening and appeasing one religious right movement, which is the Muslim right or the Islamists, is the way to commemorate the murder of 51 people who were killed by another religious right movement, which is the Christian right. And doesn't appeasing any religious right movement of any stripe strengthen the hold that these movements have on all of our societies to the detriment of women's rights, human rights, free thoughts, freedom of expression, conscience, and so on? When this movement has power, it is the end of these rights, or the beginning of the end of these rights, as they gain more and more power. And I think this is really the crux of the matter when we're discussing an International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Of course, there is bigotry against Muslims everywhere, and we have to take note, as Arif has as well, that we are talking about in a context of India, where you have the rise of the Hindu right, Hindutva, and how secularism in India is being attacked, and how Muslims are facing increasing bigotry and discrimination by this Hindu right movement and being held hostage really by Modi's government. But I guess the question is whether blasphemy laws can combat bigotry. Of course they can't. And I think using bigotry by the Islamists is a smokescreen in order to be able to impose their blasphemy rules. And I just want to give you one example about ending bigotry and how to do that, you need empathy, you need to be able to see our common humanity. And religion is one of the ways, in fact, in which citizens and our common humanity is divided. The believer is always deemed superior to the others. And if we look at the war in Ukraine and refugees fleeing Ukraine, the difference of treatment of Ukrainian refugees with Black African refugees fleeing Ukraine at the same time, or with Iraqi, Syrian, Afghan, Iranian refugees, you can see that it's not a migrant crisis that's the problem, it's a crisis of bigotry against the other. And how quickly the world can empathize with, and rightly empathize with, a refugee group like the Ukrainians, rightly empathize with them just by how they are humanized, how empathy is promoted for them. So that is one way of being able to end bigotry, oppose bigotry, rather than imposing blasphemy laws, which have nothing with ending bigotry. So, and I think this is an important key, because a lot of people will think that they are under the illusion that Islamophobia and combating Islamophobia, according to them, is a way of combating bigotry. And our point is that this is a smokescreen, it's a cover, it's an illusion, it's a lie. And if you look at the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan's tweet right after this resolution was approved at the UN, he says, "Today the UN has finally recognized the grave challenge confronting the world of Islamophobia, respect for religious symbols and practices, and of curtailing systematic hate speech and discrimination against Muslims." Discrimination comes as an afterthought. It's just a cover for what is in actuality an attempt to impose de facto blasphemy laws in countries where Islam is not in political power. And you see this conflation, as we have all seen as ex-Muslims, between free thought and dissent, equating that with harm and discrimination as a way of justifying blasphemy laws. We know very clearly that disrespecting, criticizing, challenging beliefs, religion is another belief after all, or practices or symbols like the veil, like child marriage, Sharia law, women's testimony being worth half that of a man's, non-stunt slaughter of animals. All of these things are not the same as persecuting or discriminating against or hating believers. So I think what is very clear from this International Day of Combating Islamophobia is that it is a win for the Islamists. They win when this day is recognized by the United Nations. And it is clearly, without a doubt, an imposition of de facto blasphemy laws, because whenever you see any Islamist defend this idea of combating Islamophobia, it is always about defending Islam, defending Islamism against dissent and doubt and criticism. And it's completely the opposite of defending the vulnerable. This actually defends the most powerful, those who are in state power, particularly when you look at a situation where religion and the state are intertwined. The more that they are intertwined, the more harsh blasphemy laws are, because it is a way of controlling their power. And when this earthly and so-called divine power come together and they become one and the same, criticizing God is the same as criticizing the state. Criticizing the state is the same as criticizing God. And that's why for these Islamic states, blasphemy laws are so important, that they need to ensure that in an age of social media, that de facto at least, it has its reach on critics of Islam internationally as well. And I think when you look at what this day is actually doing, we could clearly say that it is nothing short of an outrage. I mean, Arif just mentioned March 16th, the day after March 15th, which marks the hacking to death of Farooq, an Indian rationalist, atheist, ex-Muslim free thinker, by Islamists. We know right now Sohail Arabi, an Iranian atheist who was on death row for blasphemy, who was released in internal exile after 8 years imprisonment, recently, and he's just been called to serve another 2-year sentence because of his atheism and free thought. You've got Ayaz Nizami in that very Pakistan that has been talking about combating Islamophobia. He's on death row for blasphemy. You've got Raif Badawi in Saudi Arabia, who's just been released after 10 years imprisonment for free thought, and he's got another 10-year travel ban and cannot join his family. And of course, this is you know, on and on and on, the examples of those who have been persecuted by the Islamist movement, by the religious right movement. And here, instead of commemorating them, there is a day to commemorate those who are persecuting. In effect, that is what it is. It is commemorating blasphemy laws. It is commemorating, appeasing, strengthening the Islamists at the expense of those who dissent, who doubt, who refuse and resist through all the only means that people and the powerless have, which is through their free expression, expressing their opinions and their beliefs and their non-belief. I think the other point that needs to be made is that it is safe to say that one of the reasons that there is so much support by Islamic states and by governments that spend, you know, that have worked very hard in appeasing the Islamic movement for various reasons, that this call to combat Islamophobia is really in response to the tsunami of atheism and free thought that is taking place in countries under Islamic rule. And it's a way of reaching to those outside of the states where Islam is in power in order to try to silence dissent, particularly given the role that social media now plays in defending free thought and free expression. So I think, to summarize, I think it is a day that supports blasphemy laws. It is a day that is a win for Islamists. And it is a day in which blasphemy laws are legitimized and justified at the expense of victims. It's a form of victim blaming. It's a form of trying to silence those who are refusing to abide by these rules and laws and who are daring to challenge them. So I think it's hugely important that the NRC and the ex-Muslims of Kerala have named March 16th as the day to expose Islamophobia, because it is a day that Islamophobia must be exposed as a ploy to silence and censor in aid of the most powerful religious right movements in the countries across the Middle East and North Africa. And it is also an important day to remember the victims and survivors of this movement, and very apt to remember a beloved Farouk, the father of two children, someone who stood up and said what he believed in, and was hacked to death in such a brutal and violent way as a result. So I want to congratulate the two organizations for this event, for bringing this day, a day that we hope, as the ex-Muslim movement and atheists and free thinkers internationally, as well as believers who are defenders of secularism and who oppose the religious right, because there are many more believers who oppose the religious right than there are believers who support the religious right, in my opinion, that this will be a day that will be commemorated day in and day out as a day that is hugely important, given the many, many, many victims of the Islamic movement, as well as the many who are still so bravely refusing and resisting across the globe, and who still need our support and solidarity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maryam. I don't think the whole subject and the whole idea requires any any explanations further. It was so much lucid and clear. So now I call upon Hina from Ex-Muslims of India to represent, to give her speech about the whole idea. She's representing ex-Muslims of India. Ex-Muslims of India is an online support group for the ex-Muslims. And that was one of the groups, as I said earlier, which gave us the inspiration to begin the whole thing, which has resulted the whole organization and what we are doing right now. So please, Hina, thank you. I think we'll go on to Faisal and
I think the mic permission is the issue. You should check the mic permission and then go in settings and test the mic and speakers.
Yeah, it's already provided. It's clear. Okay, I think we'll move on to Faisal. By the time Hina will be ready with her mic. Yeah, Hina is here. Hina.
Very good evening to all for this virtual gathering for discussing the topic exposing Islamophobia and combat Islamophobia. First of all, I would like to quote a recently released novel by Michel Houellebecq in French. The novel predicts the victory of election victory of a Muslim Brotherhood in France in 2022. Then the Muslim Brotherhood, led by a fictional character Muhammad bin Abbas, comes to power in France, and he imposes Sharia and he imposes blasphemy law, etc. in France. It may be purely imaginary, but it is a ensuing threat upon the world, because Islam is an ideology, a totalitarian fascist ideology that is rightly to be feared. Arif Hussain Sahab has pointed out at the outset that phobia means something which is irrational fear. But fearing Islam is not irrational, it is a rational fear. Because Islam has a track record of wiping out many cultures and civilizations, like the glorious culture of Persia and the present day empire. It is a very fascistic movement based upon the Arabi or Qurayshi nationalism. We can see in the Kitab al-Marat in Sahih Muslim that it says that, I quote, if there is only 2 Qurayshis left in the world, even then the Khilafat belongs to the Qurayshis. So it is basically, Islam is a Qurayshi fascist or Qurayshi nationalist movement. Once upon a time, when Muhammad started preaching Islam, a delegation from Qurayshis visited him and told him that if you differ from or you refrain from preaching Islam, we will reward you. He said that, I quote, if you uphold my slogan, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, you will get, the Qurayshis will get dominance over Arabs, and Arabs will get dominance over the others, the Ajamis. So Islam is basically a Qurayshi or Arabic nationalist fascist movement. It has all the features of fascism that was appeared in Italy under Mussolini. It is nationalistic, it is militaristic, it is racistic. So fearing Islam is not irrational. So declaring 15th March as a day for combating Islamophobia by United Nations is totally unwarranted. Because even now, world is facing many threats from Islam, as Maryam Namazie Madam has pointed out. Blasphemy laws, how careless this was Bedouin laws are. Even in Pakistan, that the Asia Bibi case. Asia Bibi was an innocent lady, Christian lady. She was arrested and prosecuted for blasphemy. Finally, Supreme Court acquitted her. But even the fundamentalist elements in Pakistan declared that those judges who acquitted Asia Bibi should be shot dead. And one major politician, a prominent politician, Salman Taseer, who was governor of Punjab, who argued for relaxation of these blasphemy laws, was shot dead. And the bodyguard who murdered Salman Taseer was celebrated as a Shaheed. Even now, recently, the president of Humanist Association of Nigeria, Mubarak Bala, was arrested for blasphemy, and he was sentenced for 24 years in prison. So, Islam is something that is to be fed off. It is that is to be terrorized. It is a terrorizing factor. As Richard Dawkins recently pointed out, Islam is a cancer that is eating the world. Recently, the Sultanate of Brunei has imposed death penalty for those who are engaging in same-sex activity. It is a great. Actually, the world is accepting the diversity in sexuality and sanctioning rights to LGBT community. But the Sultanate of Brunei has imposed the death penalty on LGBT community. So all these points out that Islam should be exposed. Islam should be feared. Only in Quran itself, which is the basic tenet of Islam, we can see many terrorizing for utterings like the Ayatul Hiraba. Ayatul Hiraba says that indeed the penalty for those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and spread mischief in that land is death, crucifixion, cutting off their hands and feet on opposite sides, or exile from the land. The penalty is disgrace for them in this world, and they will suffer the tremendous punishment in the hereafter. It is the Ayatul Hiraba. How dangerous it is. It is for how illiberal and how anti-plural it is. So the basic tenet of Islam says like this. And there is also a verse of sword. Ayatul say. It says that then when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them, and take them captive, and besiege them, and prepare for them each ambush. It is also exhorts Muslims to fight perpetual war against those who are not believing in Allah and His Messenger. So Islam is also sanctioning genocide. We know the genocide of Abu Qurayza tribe. If we apply the present international law regarding genocide, we can easily find that it was the massacre of Banu Qurayza was a genocide. In Islamic history, we can see many genocides, like Armenian genocide under Sultan Abdul Hamid II of Turkey, and also the recent Yazidi massacre, genocide by ISIS. All this shows that Islam is something to be feared of and defended against. So, this Islam celebrating or the combat against Islamophobia, or finding everything, any criticism as Islamophobia is unwarranted and it should not be allowed. So also we can see another point is Muslimophobia. Muslimophobia is quite different because Muslims are the worst victims of Islam. Because we have to enlighten them about Islam, and we have to liberate them from Islam. They should not be discriminated against, or they should not be uh, discriminated and isolated. But our duty, our sacred duty, is to enlighten them about Islam, how Islam victimized them. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that we have also to remember Farooq, our fellow ex-Muslim. He was hacked to death at Coimbatore, few years back on 16th March. He remembers us of Socrates. Socrates was tried and convicted and executed for propagating rationalism in ancient Athens. But even at the time of death, he upheld his ideals. There is a painting by Jacques David titled The Death of Socrates. In that one, we can see that at the face of death, Socrates is very fearless and he is upholding his, preaching his ideals. There is a saying by Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. He says that the death of a tyrant marks the end of his regime or his reign, but death of a martyr marks beginning of his regime, his reign. So death of Farooq does not go in vain. It will inspire us to fight against the callous fascist Islamic tyranny. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that I would like to remind you the words of Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, who was a universal humanist. He inscribed on the openings of his university, Shantiniketan Vishwabharati, that Yatra Vishwam Bhavatega Neda, the whole world will turn into a nest, and in which all the humanity will live as brothers. So let us expose Islamophobia. Let us expose Islam as a fascist movement, a totalitarian fascist movement, as Dutch politician Geert Wilders rightly pointed out. And so also, let us fight against Muslimophobia. Let us work for a world, a tomorrow in which all human beings will live as equals with dignity and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. It was Faisal who spoke to us, and I was not able to give a proper introduction just before he was speaking. He's the executive member of Ex-Muslims of Kerala and Non-Religious Citizens of India. In both the organizations, he is the executive member. And he's known for his political essays and columns, which he writes for various news outlets in India. And he's a voracious reader and both a writer. And he's the biggest asset of both the organizations. So thank you so much, Faisal, for giving these wonderful words. So now I hope Hina is okay with the mic. So
I hope I'm audible now.
Yeah, you're audible. Please go on. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arif and RC and Ex-Muslims of Kerala, for this opportunity. And I'm deeply humbled and very happy to be here. And I am also very thankful to Maryam, Namazie and Faisal for their valuable insights. And I'm sure all of you have a lot to say on Islamophobia and the politics around it. But I would further like to contextualize it in the Indian setting. As an ex-Muslim, it is this politics of space that is difficult to navigate. While the attack on Muslim practices may seem genuine, it is nonetheless an attack out of ill will. India is a deeply religious country. An average Indian has blind beliefs and practices. An average Indian is scared of black magic and black cats. We all have been brought up with these practices and rituals we do not question. And it takes courage to ask those questions as a minority. H. Farooq did that. Narendra Dabholkar did that. M. Kalburgi did that. They may not be here with us today, but their courage lives on. And in a country that does not encourage critical thinking, and yet questions Muslim practices shows the problem is less with Islamic faith, but that with Muslims. That is my problem with the current politics around the criticism of Islam in India. It is not genuine. Our political climate is very dangerous. We have rape threats happening outside mosques. We have non-veg being banned on the day of Ramzan in the name of Navratri. We have Muslim traders getting banned. It is very obvious what they're trying to say, that Muslims do not belong here, that this is not their country. An average Muslim in India is scared, and they are pushed enough to double down on their religious identity. It is quite natural if your identity is attacked like that. Even if you didn't think about it before, you will think about it now. There is polarization that is happening, and it is happening on both ends. Things as inconsequential as halal meat is being turned into controversies. Messages given, I mean, it's not just that it's happening to Muslims, it's happening to all of us. In the words of Manto, "Itna Musalman ho ki mara jaun," means that I am Muslim enough to get killed. One of the very fresh examples, I think it happened like a day or two ago, was of this confectionery shop, Haldiram's, where the controversy was they had snacks which had labels in Urdu. And that was a problem because Urdu is not supposed to be a language spoken in India. Now, this actually shows that the attack was not on Islam, but on Muslims, because Urdu has nothing to do with Islam. Urdu is not an Islamic language, it's a Persian, Indo-Persian language. This is what I want to highlight as Muslimophobia. This is not Islamophobia. And this is what is a problem that I think is very important. And this is what I would like to really talk about. But when we talk about this, we have to also talk about Islamophobia. And I strongly believe change cannot be forced from outside, it must come from within. And I believe it is on us ex-Muslims, progressive Muslims, secular Muslims, rational Muslims, even atheists and rationalists, people who do not have faith, to take the charge forward, to ask those questions that need to be asked, to have a critical mind, to have a critical thought, to express themselves. And we should be able to express our lives, express ourselves, live our lives. We should have that right. And we should be able to do it without fear of anything else. That is the problem with the politics around Islamophobia, in my opinion. It's not just that because we are critical of Islam, it means that we're critical of Muslims. It's not that we hate Muslims or we are bigoted towards Muslims as a community. We aren't the same as those right-wing bigots out there who are spreading violence and hatred against the whole community. This is a distinction that we really need to stress on, and not just us, the world needs to see this distinction. We don't mean any harm to anyone. I am critical of Islam, but I still love and respect my people who happen to be Muslim. I see their humanness, I see their flaws, I see their faith. I see them beyond their Muslimness, and I do not wish to bring them any harm. But that is one aspect of me. There is another aspect that you all have rightly pointed out, that Islam has a very dark origins. It has a lot of violence in it. Its scriptures, its verses, its belief, the ideas it propagates are very harmful to humanity, and we must question it. And I am not a hateful bigot for it. I am just a rational human, and I should have the right to constructively criticize. And this is why it's so important that we have a day like this, where we are stressing on this distinction between Islamophobia and Muslimophobia. And I hope we can bring change through it, through constructive dialogues. And I am thankful for this day. I hope that slain Farooq's courage will not go wasted, and we must carry forward their legacy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hina. We used to say, actually, that criticizing Islam is like walking on a minefield, because there is every chance that those who are engaged in criticizing Islam can happen to be haters or promotion, engaged in promotion of Muslimophobia, or the kind of hate, the bigotry against Muslims. So we need to be very careful, and that's the reason why we came forward to keep the title itself as the disambiguation of this Islamophobia and Muslimophobia, and to clarify whether the usage of the term, that is Islamophobia, that phobia itself, what is the epistemological basis of that. So thank you so much, Hina, for making it a little more elaborate by citing examples from our own country. So thank you so much. Now we have Haris Sultan. As we all know, he's an author and a podcaster and a YouTuber, and that's how. And Haris and Apostate Prophet, these two are the persons who are the reasons for why I am sitting here today, who helped me to come out of this religion and to understand all the backwardness of this Islam and all. So, first of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for that. We are, in fact, meeting for the first time. So he's an Australian ex-Muslim, atheist of Pakistani descent. Has moved to Australia at the age of 19 and was exposed to the big wide world other than his hometown of Lahore, Pakistan, which eventually led him away from Islam. So he has also published a book, The Curse of God, in December 2018. So this is all about Haris, and there are much more about him. So let's hear from him. Thank you. Welcome, Haris.
Thank you, Arif, for giving this wonderful opportunity to speak with all of you and your audience that you are setting up, and it's always a pleasure to share any platform with Maryam Namazie. I still get the butterflies every time I see her, because, as you say, this is such an amazing chain reaction that's been set in motion. But when we go all the way back, it all starts from Maryam and how she inspired so many people. I can never forget, but anyway, I wouldn't go into that. And also my friend Ghalib is here as well, who's also quite a rock in this movement, especially in the India and Pakistan movement of ex-Muslim. It's still very new, but it's spreading like wildfire, which is why it's concerning to a lot of people, especially in Pakistan. And Maryam touched base on how, and being a Pakistani, I think I need to take a little bit more responsibility that has come from my country, Pakistan, Imran Khan, being responsible for it. And I think it's important to highlight how this is a dishonestly crafted misnomer by certain individuals, and how it just stuck with a lot of people, and then they went with it. For a very long time, I thought people just didn't understand what Islamophobia meant, but it does appear now that they might not have initially meant, they might not have understood initially, but now they're just going with it, and they're like, okay, well, let's just smuggle that in as well, because as Muslims, we all know how closely Muslims feel their identity with Islam, how they tie the two together. It's not in the West where if people don't really attach their entire existence with their religion. So, but in Islam, they do. Muslims do feel that if you say anything about the Prophet or the Quran or about our religious practices, that's it. That's out of question. I feel attacked. I feel threatened. So, and I think Muslims themselves, or the Islamic leaders themselves, have set Muslims up for a massive failure, because this is not going to pan out the way they want. And how Imran Khan tweeted after that, and Maryam highlighted that. It said, today, UN has finally recognized the grave challenge confronting the world of Islamophobia, respect for religious symbols and practices. He smuggled that in. The rest of the part, you and I and most of us would probably agree with that. Curtailing systemic hate speech and discrimination against Muslims. Next challenge is to ensure implementation of this landmark resolution. Now, what does it mean by that? Now, let me tell you a little bit about how Imran Khan is going to be soon to be our ex-prime minister, and how he's been using that for his political gains. He has been beating his chest to the wide audiences of Pakistan, and he's saying, well, I'm the only guy who gave that speech in the UN General Assembly. I told the white man that when you criticize Islam, it hurts us. When you make fun of the Prophet, it hurts us. And now they have acknowledged that. Look at me. I am your savior. I am your Muslim hero. I'm your Tughral. Sorry, I just hit the mute button. So he's been using that, and it works. A lot of people have been calling him the modern defender, the Saladin, the modern defender of faith, and all of that. It works. But the problem here is the West doesn't actually realize, or do they, that what they're getting themselves into. Now, I don't want to go too much in detail about the freedom of expression, how important that is. When the printing press, and I think, let me quote Maryam Namazie here as well. I think it's largely attributed to her, and I think I would probably ask her if that quote is, if she's the one who came up with that. But this is how I take it. The internet is doing to Islam what printing press did to Christianity. And what happened in the 15th century when printing press was invented? Before that, writing books, writing anything was a laborious work. So one great writer, author would come up with something and write one book, and then to make 100 copies, you'll need 100 scribes. And it was a hard and laborious work, and it would just stay in the libraries, and only very few people would see it. Printing press exploded that. Now, all of a sudden, just like now, anyone can say anything on Twitter or Facebook or social media, and that becomes a headache for a lot of people. It gives rise to Trumpism, gives rise to a lot of flat earthers, and it does give rise to a lot of stupid as well. But it also challenges the status quo. The status quo was the church and the crown. Monarchies, God save the queen or king, whoever there was at that point, and then the Pope controls everything. But now printing press gave rise to a lot of other kind of work that could be easily multiplied, and people could access that. Pope was the first one who actually started banning the books that were written by dissidents, and then also there was a political threat as well. And then I think, let me quote John Milton in the 17th century, when all of this kept going on in the West for so long, and freedom of expression was eventually recognized by the Western establishments. And this quote is considered paramount by John Milton. It says, "Give me the liberty to know, to utter and to argue freely according to conscience above all liberties." Protestants suddenly accepted that, because again they were challenging the status quo as well. And that's how freedom of expression in the modern world in the 17th century was born. And Galileo, John Milton himself, Hume, Voltaire, all of their works were actually banned by the church. And what were they doing? They were just talking, thinking freely, and they were raising voices for ideas that were challenging the status quo. So the West acknowledged that, and that's where we came. We came here on the backs of free speech. Free speech, the only major difference between the West, I don't even like to use the word the West, because that somehow it just upsets some people that, hey, West, the white man, you're praising them. But unfortunately, it is the epicenter of free speech in the free world. But the West recognized free speech, and that is the only difference between the West and the rest of the world. It's not just the money. It's not the economy. Well, you can find a lot of money in Saudi Arabia and UAE as well, but there's no freedom of speech. The quality of life, why everyone wants to live in the West, is because freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and that includes freedom of religion and from religion. And that's the beauty of it. This act of recognizing Islamophobia, even though the West might not actually still say it, but they just went with this misnomer and they thought, okay, well, this is a good idea. Let's just go with it. But the agenda behind that is quite clear, how Imran Khan says it: criticism of our religious sentiments or religious symbols and practices. Respect for it. No! There was no respect for Christian religion given in the 16th century by Hume and Voltaire and Kant and all these people later on. And that is the cornerstone of the West. And that Islamophobia is somehow being mistaken in the Muslim world. And then this is why I said they are being set up for failure, because what's going to happen now? You and I, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep criticizing Islam. We're going to keep talking about the evil side effects of Islam as a religion, the practices, and we're going to keep doing that. And the UN Islamophobia Day is not going to stop us, because the freedom of expression would still be there at individual level. How is Canada going to symbolize Islamophobia Day? And then they're going to say, well, sorry, from now on, you can't talk about Islam. Well, they can't do that, because when we talk against Islam, we're basically upholding this liberal secular values. If we talk about slavery or sex slavery, which we're going to do all the time, and that is what's pulling a lot of people out of Islam, who's going to say, well, sorry, you can't speak against slavery? Oh, so are you telling us that we should bring back slavery? No, we shouldn't bring back slavery. Oh, okay. Well, that's what Islam entitles. So it's never going to happen. Imran Khan or all these people, OIC, as they call, Organization for Islamic Conference, this is probably the only victory they've ever had. They've never done anything in the 60-year history, or however long it's been around for. It's not going to work. But they are preparing their audience, and they're saying, well, okay, from now on, I've received messages and emails from so many Pakistani journalists and even a couple of politicians as well, saying, well, now, you will be hunted down in the West as well. Your safe haven is gone. That's not going to happen. And I told them, look, don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. They would never shut it. They could never. I don't know whether they want to or not, but they can't shut us down in the name of respect for religious symbols. So what's going to happen? We're going to keep doing this. People are going to get upset in the Muslim world. They're going to say, well, hang on. You recognize Islamophobia. Why are you not shutting down Maryam Namazie? Why are you not shutting down Ghalib or AP or whoever? Why are you not shutting them down? Because that's just not going to happen. And then there's going to be more anger, and there's going to be more hatred for the West. And basically, they're setting themselves up for failure. So I'm not going to go into how stupid the term Islamophobia is. I think Maryam explained it, and Arif explained it really well. I just hope that a lot of people fear, a lot of people worry about that this is going to somehow silence us. I just want to give hope, or I'm naturally optimistic person, and I genuinely believe that this actually means nothing. It's just basically, tickling the fantasy of some Muslim leaders who want to be heroes and saviors of Islam, that, hey, look, we recognize it's not Islam, it's Muslims. And as far as the anti-Muslim bigotry is concerned, you guys mentioned, and this day is commemorated after the day 15th of March, or February, sorry, when the Christchurch massacre happened. I was the one who launched the biggest petition against Faisal, an Australian senator who blamed Muslims, whose vitriol was very clear. It was an Australian senator towards Muslims. He basically blamed Muslims. Why? Because I don't share any platform with anyone who does not understand that hatred towards Muslims does not it goes against every secular liberal values that we try to propagate or uphold. And this is why there is no question on whether we would stand against anti-Muslim bigotry or not. We would always stand against it. As a previous speaker said, our families are Muslims. None of us want our family members to be treated as or to be vilified or racially attacked or pushed down the subway or get their hijab pulled off. Nobody wants that. These are not the values that we're propagating. But at the same time, does the West understand that Islamophobia, they are basically shooting themselves in the foot? Are they giving a false message to Muslims that, hey, okay, we recognize your religion should not be criticized? But I don't think this is what the message from the UN was. But again, they just went with this silly word, and I think there's going to be some repercussions later on. But we would not be. I don't think that would impact us or stop us from criticizing Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. I think this elaboration gave much more shade to the whole discussion happening here, especially with Harris and many other, our Ghalib, yet to come and talk about the situations which was prevailing in Pakistan and giving much clearer picture of how the whole things are happening. So I think it is getting more clear. Now we have Irina. She's an ex-Muslim from Bangladesh, and she is now working as a physicist with specialization in particle and nuclear physics. And she's a founder of a Finnish startup company and member volunteer of Atheist Alliance International. And for last 10 years, she's researching in the field of radio astronomy and experimental particle physics and whole lot of fields related to physics. That's her passion and her job and everything. So, and last day I was talking to her, and she was giving this idea that always in Bangladesh, we are seeing that the teachers who are teaching science is being chased down by the pupil, the children who are not even 10 years old, and they are saying that they are blasphemers, and it's being called out like they have to kill those teachers just because they were teaching science, and it's against the Quran. So she wanted to be a scientist and to show the world, especially from being from Bangladesh, that matters a lot. So I wish her all the best wishes for that, and I welcome her to deliver her speech here. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Arif, and thank you for inviting me here for the introduction. And I would like to specifically thank non-religious citizens and Kerala ex-Muslims for hosting this wonderful event. And the topic we are talking today is so important because it continues to influence a lot of lives around the world. And I personally feel that we need to discuss more and more from all the angles possible so that the questions that emerge from both the sides, like from the Muslim sides and from also Western sides, can be answered and the doubts can be cleared. So since the previous speakers already laid a very strong background of what the term Islamophobia means and what are the premises of Islamist movements and how the contradiction arise, I would like to rather shed light on the problem by sharing one of my own personal experience. So the experience will help you understand how damaging the term Islamophobia is in the reality. So I was still a Muslim few years ago, and I was a progressive Muslim. Before that, I was more religious, but eventually, as I studied science, my faith on the religion started weakening, and I became almost, you can say, a spiritual Muslim at one point. I believed in human rights. I believed in standing up for people. So I went and joined one of the Finnish non-profit organization that works on racism, and it represents the minorities in Finland. It talks about the rights of minorities in Finland. When I joined them, I saw how they work. They go to schools. They talk about the discriminations Muslims face or Sami people face, and we used to collect stories from the victims directly, and we used to teach other people how to recognize how racism works, how bigotry works, how the structural racism works. So I felt that, okay, I'm at the right place, and I used to feel very proud of the work. However, slowly I started realizing that the more I thought about religion and God concept in general, my faith started kind of going away. And at one point, I was convinced that, okay, fine, the religion is basically it's just there for us to feel better about the world that we don't know about, the universe that we don't know about. And so at one point, I actually came out and I told everybody close to me that I'm not religious and I do not think I want to identify as a Muslim anymore. And I thought much in a deletion, you can say, because I have been abroad for a long time. So I don't remember too much about in this period, the kind of discrimination I faced while growing up as a Muslim girl. So I felt like it was more to do with the social problems in Bangladesh. I didn't really relate directly with the religion just then. But when I left the religion, when I told people, well, I do not believe in this religion anymore, that is when I started actually facing the discrimination. I started realizing that people who once called themselves my friends started going away, like going as far away from me as possible. And some people were really, really like threatening me personally, like, why can't you keep quiet and stuff like that, and much bigotry and discrimination I faced. And as soon as I told this, to my fellow colleagues in that organization, the so-called human rights, they completely like ignored that this is happening. And they were like more talking about, oh, but that is not real Islam. But like there is this one girl in a school, her hijab was torn up, So they started bringing all the stories in my story instead of hearing mine. Although they don't do that when other victims talk about their stories. If that was a Muslim girl talking about her story, nobody will stop her and say that, like, well, there are other stories against it, So right there, I remember the owner of the organization told me, but Irina, I think you are just so full of hate because you have bad experience, but real Islam is not like that, Irina, and the Muslims here are very much discriminated. It just went over my head, like, why are they talking about Muslims? Like, because my rights should not interfere with a Muslim's right. Her story is as valid as my story. So why is she bringing it there? So my brain completely like it just went off, like what's going on? And then so I just told them that I don't feel very comfortable working anymore. I wanted a bit short break, and that is when I thought a lot. What's going on? These are the same people who stand up for all kinds of minorities, but as soon as they know I'm an ex-Muslim, they are completely shoving me away. What is going on? Why don't they anymore want to hear my story or represent the people like me, Later on, I had a very hard look on this term, Islamophobia, and I realized why. Because now you have a religion, it's made equal to people. So if you want to protect Muslims, now you cannot anymore talk against Islam. And if your story in any way goes against what Islam stands up to be, or the narrative of Islam somehow, if you try to portray it wrong, also now you are a bigot, and nobody wants to represent you anymore. So this is like a real problem. So I like wrote a resigned letter. I left the organization. I told them why I'm leaving, not because I don't believe in the rights of Muslims anymore, but because I feel you do not talk about my rights and people like me. Later on, I came in touch with some ex-Muslims in Finland, similar stories when their families were extremely abusive towards them, when their families were threatening them. The system did not help them. They did not have anywhere to go tell their stories. So it's been years, and that organization or any other human rights organization here would have the courage to speak about my story or people like us, because they feel as soon as they speak, they will be called Islamophobe. And that is the problem. And I would like to also highlight another problem why Islamophobia is a bad term. It's not only that it kind of shows that the rights, you cannot talk about the rights of Muslims and rights of ex-Muslims at the same time. That is what it should basically say. It is mutually exclusive. And second, the problem is the more we raise this kind of idea that talking against Islam is a bad thing, then what happens that the white supremacists and people who are already somewhat critical about Islam or who do not really understand the whole situation, they quickly start blaming Muslims for everything. They think like all Muslims are same, all Muslims are violent, but that's not true. So the criticism of Islam has to be separated. That Islam has to be separated from the group of people who follows it, is the Muslims. As we know very well, that Muslims are divided into how to interpret Islam and the Quran and the Holy Scriptures, and not all Muslims support violence. So I would like to, I just wanted to share this story to shed the light what real life it looks like. And I know personally many victims of it, even in countries, progressive, developed countries like Finland, Switzerland. I know people from Germany who are ex-Muslims who were born and brought up abroad. I'm not talking about Bangladesh or India or Pakistan. They were born and brought up here, but living Islam wasn't easy for them. Because now, when they left Islam, they were abused. They went to the police, and the police was like, well, it's your culture. We cannot do anything about it. In most of the cases, they were denied much like speaking up or anything. They become closeted They have their own small community. So how is it possible that the people who are working for human rights of Muslims are so silent about human rights of ex-Muslims? Why should they be mutually exclusive? And why should Islam as an ideology get special privilege when other ideologies don't? No ideology deserves special privilege, and all the ideologies we have the right to criticize, to improve, and to discuss without being called a bigot. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina, for that wonderful elaboration. That was really hitting to the direct point where the things has to be, especially regarding the way criticizing Islam when done by an ex-Muslim and the minority rights, all these things gets mixed up the moment we talk about Islam. Everything vanishes into thin air, and that's how this whole thing works. That's how this authorities or the governments and everyone falls on the knees just in front of Islam. That's what we are seeing here. Thank you so much. Now we have Ghalib Kamal. He's also from Pakistan. He's known for his wonderful shows on YouTube, and he's a human rights defender and freethinker who rejects dogma and religious extremism. And he has shared a piece of instance from his life on his website that I has quoted here. I'll just read through that. In 2017, Pakistani authorities started a crackdown against bloggers and social media activists. Many bloggers were abducted and tortured, and even some are facing blasphemy cases to this day. Ghalib fled Pakistan in 2017 because of his revealed identity, due to that he feared arrest and severe threat against his life. So at this moment, when we talk about this Islamophobia or the reasons why we need to fear Islam, and if any of the believers who are listening to us, any of you have a doubt that we are talking lies, or we are just creating any kind of hate, or we are just telling lies about Islam, just look at the people who are sitting here. You can see two people sitting here with their faces covered. Just ask yourself what might be the reason they are asked to sit like this, or they chose to sit like that. Their identity is to be kept hidden. The anonymity is so important. That is their freedom. So when you talk about this, the verses of hijab, it's written that sorry, Ghalib, for taking 1 minute from you. That is, it's written in Quran that you have to wear hijab to let you know from others. That's what is written in the verse of hijab. It's not to hide you. It's the hijab is entrusted upon you to make you known that you are free women. You are not a slave woman. So that was the core idea of why this hijab was there. But now when you look at the people, look at two of our friends sitting here, and they are forced to cover their face, it is to make them not known, to keep them anonymous, so that they can live freely in this world. So that itself is the biggest example by which you can clearly see that Islam is something to be feared. Otherwise, these people's life is in danger, and this is how Islam operates. So, welcome, Ghalib.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with something. What is basically this term Islamophobia? Basically, this is a propaganda term that has been coined to silence the critics of Islam. So what is a phobia basically? Phobia is basically an irrational fear of something, a fear that cannot be rationally justified. So that is basically a phobia. It's basically a psychological term that psychologists use for different things. But when it comes to Islam, basically this term Islamophobia is just a lie. Why it's a lie? Because we can see victims of Islam everywhere. We can see lots of victims of Islam everywhere. We can see H. Farooq, who was killed, and he was the victim, but the ultimate victims will be whom? His children and his wife and all the people who loved him, who cared for him, who depended on him. And there are many other examples like that. There was Mashal Khan, who was killed back in 2017. There was Salman Taseer, who was a outspoken proponent of human rights, and he was speaking against blasphemy laws in Pakistan. He was not speaking against Islam. He was speaking for human rights. And I'll clarify this to you guys why it's important to criticize Islam, because Islam violates human rights everywhere. So then, adult people, they understand things, they can criticize, they can have opinions that are well founded, that are grounded, that are maybe sometimes set in stone, they are unchangeable. But children are, like flowers, they are like a clay that has not hardened. It is soft, and they yet have to achieve some kind of thing in their life. Their personalities are not solidified. But are children victims of Islam? H. Farouk's children are victim of Islam. There was in the 90s, I was just a kid at that time, and there was a child in Pakistan who was just 11 years old, and his name is Barkat Masih. So he was alleged of blasphemy, and then a blasphemy case was registered against him, his father, and his uncle. But the problem is, all three of them were totally illiterate. They couldn't read, they could not write. And the allegation against Barkat Masih was that he wrote curses against Prophet Muhammad on the wall of a mosque. And that child never went to school, did not know how to read, did not know how to write, and he was alleged of blasphemy. And then this child was on trial, and at that time he was maybe 13 or 14 years of age, and outside Lahore High Court there was an assassination attempt on him and his father and his uncle, in which his father lost his life. And then the trial continued, and can you imagine the horror that this child would have gone through, that his father was killed in front of him, in front of his eyes. Even when he was shot at, one of the bullets hit his hands because he was hiding under a car trying to escape the assassins. So who would tell Barkat Masih that Islamophobia is wrong and Islam is a good religion and Islam is something that does not, is not his enemy? Who would tell him? Or who would tell the children of recently brutally murdered, mob lynched Priyantha Kumara, a Sri Lankan citizen who was murdered just recently in Pakistan? Can you go to them and tell them, okay, Islam is a religion of peace, Islam is something that is not your enemy? Can you tell those children? Can you tell his wife? Or can you tell the children of Shama and Shahzad? Shama and Shahzad were a Pakistani couple living in abject poverty. The poorest of the poor in Pakistan belong to the Pakistani Christian community. And Pakistani Christian community is very poor and very weak as a community. And they were both working at a brick factory. And what happened was that they were both alleged of burning some pages of Quran. And then what happened? The loudspeakers of the mosque in that area started chanting slogans and calling for their death. And a mob gathered. And when the mob gathered, they first tortured them. And Shama, the woman, was 7 months pregnant. She was 7 months pregnant. And she and her husband were stripped naked. They were both beaten. They were both alive at that time. Their legs were broken. Then they were tied behind a jeep and they were dragged around the streets of the whole village. And their 8-year-old boy, their eldest son, 8-year-old, was weeping and following that jeep all over the village. And then both of them were brought back to the same brick factory where they worked, and they were thrown into the brick kiln that was burning at that time. Both of them were burnt alive. So they died in this way. This was back in 2014. So 7 years now, 8 years now for this incident. So how would you tell the children of Shama and Shahzad that Islamophobia is something that they should not have? They should not fear Islam because, their fear is rational. They are victims of Islam. And there are many other people who are victims of Islam. How would you tell Mashal Khan's mother that, she's a Muslim? How would you tell her Maybe she believes that what happened to her son was not because of Islam. But looking from an outside point of view, you can see that what happened to him was because of Islam. Because he was an ex-Muslim, maybe. He did not believe in Islam, or maybe he was a Muslim but raising some questions on Islam. So it is not, Islam does not only victimizes the people who are ex-Muslims, but it also victimizes the people who are Muslim. Mashal Khan is a clear example of this. Salman Taseer is a clear, and it's bright as daylight that Salman Taseer, being a Muslim, was also a victim of Islam. So how do you explain all of this to the victims? How can you do that? Can you rationalize what happened to them while defending Islam, that it was not the doing of Islam? And can you tell them, okay, it was the Muslims who were evil, but if the Muslims are evil, then how come Islam cannot stop them from being evil? If Islam cannot stop them from being evil or doing something so horrific as a mob lynching, then what would you do? How would you teach these people? So I think what all of us are doing here, and at one point or another, and many a times, all of us have been termed as Islamophobes. Harif, me, Maryam, Namazie, Rishvin, everyone has been termed as an Islamophobe. But the problem is, we are critiques of Islam. We are trying to tell people that what Islam means, how it violates human rights. So if someone believes, okay, we should not criticize Islam because Islamophobia is a thing, then they also have to realize that human rights are a thing. And for the sanctity of human rights and for the benefit of humans, we have to criticize Islam, because Islam in Islamic countries, if you have a look at, because I'm talking from the perspective of Pakistan. So in every Islamic country, though it be Bangladesh, where 14 bloggers were killed in 2017, or in India, where Farooq was killed and so many others have been killed, in Pakistan, where people are behind bars facing trials and are on death row, and we cannot even speak for those people because it would be a problem for their families. Why? Because if we speak for those people, then it could be a problem for their families, and they can have problems because of this extremist version that Muslims carry with them. So I'm using the word extremist version of Islam, but let me tell you, the only extremist version of Islam that exists everywhere. Any person who is properly educated in Islam would always justify the most extreme things in Islam. Haris and I face every day, even day before yesterday, I had a live stream and there was one guy, he was defending Islamic slavery. And yesterday, there was another guy, a different guy. He was defending Islamic slavery on Haris's channel. So all the time we keep seeing this, that these people just don't believe that Islam should be criticized. And they don't know even what Islam is. So mostly when we talk about Islam, even the Muslims don't know what Islam is. That's why we say Muslims are the biggest victims of Islam. And we have many examples in front of us that the people who were victimized because of Islam. And I've named a few. But should Islamophobia be different from Muslim phobia? Yes, that is the point. And I have emphasized it again and again. Me and Haris, both of us come from Pakistan, and we did not know that what was going. We had an idea, but we never knew that what was going for the Muslims in India because of Hindutva. And me and Haris, all the time, we are criticized, we are bashed, we are called names because we talk about the rights of Muslims while maintaining that Islam is evil. So, and we try to emphasize that Muslims are victims of Islam, and Muslims should not be discriminated against. And there are whole YouTube channels going on YouTube that criticize not Islam, but the Muslim. They propagate hate against the Muslim. So Muslims are human beings. The main reason for my criticism of Islam is because Islam is always violating human rights. Islam is always making people suffer. But if Muslims suffer, then should we not talk about that? Yes, we should, and we always do. This is what we have to keep these two things separate. We have to emphasize, we have to criticize Islam harshly. We have to shed so much light on Islam that no nook and no corner is hidden and people know that what Islam is, while maintaining that Muslims are also human beings. Because, first of all, we are humanists, we are free thinkers, we are atheists, but we are humanists also. And, all of you are ex-Muslims here. I am not an ex-Muslim. I am an ex-Christian from Pakistan. I am not an ex-Muslim. But I am a victim of Islam. I had to leave Pakistan because if I had stayed there, I could have been mob lynched. I might have been behind bars and already on death row. So this is why we need to speak against Islam. And still today, I am not safe. Maybe it is going to take maybe a year more or a couple of years more before I am safe and I'm able to remove this mask. Because even the countries which are not Muslim countries, there could be some Muslim brainwashed by Islam who can come after me. Maryam is also at that risk. Rishvin is at that risk. Haris is at that risk. All of you are at that risk. So, if I think that someone can come and kill me because of Islam, is this an irrational fear? Is this Islamophobia? If, they have not only coined this term, the definition of this term is so narrow that an Islamophobe will only speak about Islam, against Islam. But the main problem is a person who fears Islam for his life. I fear Islam because I know that a Muslim can someday come and stab me like Farooq, or someday someone else can come and shoot me like Mumtaz Qadri shot Salman Taseer. So this can happen. So do you think this is a phobia? This is not a phobia. I know the risk that I'm facing, and all the activists who are working online or who are working in different spheres, who criticize Islam or who talk about Islam, everyone faces the same thing. And it is not only the critics of Islam like us. It is the proponents of Islam in Pakistan like Ghamidi, Engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza. These guys are proponents of Islam. These are also at risk. Their lives are also, they are also facing threats. They're also facing a lot of danger because of Islam. Not because they criticize. That's why these guys are also facing a lot of problems. This guy, Engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza, a mullah from Pakistan, because he has a slightly different narrative about Islam. So this guy, there was a recent murder attempt on this guy. Ghamidi faces the same thing. So if these guys think, okay, Islamophobia is something that people fear Islam because they have bad experiences with Islam or they don't like Islam, no. People's lives are facing threat because of Islam, not only because they are ex-Muslims or they are atheists or they criticize Islam. Even if you have a slightly different narrative about Islam from one of those people who take it in a different way, who believe that they have the right to kill, and they do believe that they have the right to kill. Even the people who are being threatened because of Islam, like Ghamidi or Engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza and many others in Pakistan, they also have the same opinion that a blasphemer should be put to death and apostate should be murdered. So I think we should also, when we emphasize on the issue of Islamophobia and criticizing Islam, we should also focus that it is not only the ex-Muslims and people like us who criticize Islam that fear Islam. No, it is the mullahs themselves who fear Islam, because someone from a slightly different interpretation of Islam might come and kill them. So this is how bad it is. Secondly, Maryam was talking in the beginning about the discrimination. And I agree with that. Why? Because since 5 years, I have been an asylum seeker, and for the last 2 years, I am a refugee. But still, I'm waiting for relocation, but no one cares about the people with brown skin. People with white skin definitely get a lot of, attention. Like I feel I'm happy that Ukrainians are, being relocated, but it is also people like us. It is not only, discrimination or racism is not a thing that is only specific to Muslims. It is specific to everyone. Like there are people who are refugees and asylum seekers for such a long time, but no one hears them. And I can tell you, maybe it would seem a little bit selfish talking about this here, but I should also tell you that there should be something. UN is very quick to pass a bill against Islamophobia, but UN has yet to recognize that ex-Muslims or critics of Islam or dissidents from Muslim countries have no voice anywhere in the world. There are people like Maryam Namazie and many other who are speaking against all of this, and hats off to all of them. But the people sitting above, the people sitting in UN, they're deaf. They don't listen to people like us. They don't listen to the problems of ex-Muslims or the problems of dissidents who come from Islamic countries, though they are political or religious. Still, and I think this bill about Islamophobia, I think it will not have the effect that they want to, but it depends. It depends upon people like us, because we have to be more vocal about Islam. We have to stay strong and we have to do what we are doing. And I can promise you that this time, and maybe 10 years from now, or maybe 15 years from now, we would be in a much better position. And maybe due to the struggle that we would do and we are already doing, we would be able to bring forward the case of ex-Muslims and a case against Islamophobia, the sham term, the fake term that they've coined to protect Islam from criticism. So that's all what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghalib. Amongst all the pessimistic people all over the world, we are glad to have a bunch of people, mostly optimistic, sitting here, and you represented the most optimistic one. So I wish the best for you. So thank you so much. Now we have Rishvin. Rishvin is my bestest friend in this journey of being an ex-Muslim and the whole creation of this ex-Muslim organization and NRC and many other things. Even the conduction of this program that was happened just because of his inputs and his help. So he's so near and dear to me, to us ex-Muslims as a whole and the NRC community here. So he's an ex-Muslim from Sri Lanka, and he has a very horrific story to share to us, and that's regarding a narrow escape from an ISIS attempt to kill him just before the Easter Sunday suicide attacks. So he is a survivor, or he was a near the death experience he had regarding that. So he's the firebrand ex-Muslim from Sri Lanka, and what more we can hear from him. So let's move to him. Welcome, Rishvin.
Thank you, Arif. I hope that I'm audible. Okay, thank you. First of all, I thank NRC and ex-Muslims Kerala for declaring this March 16th as International Day for exposing Islamophobia and combating Muslimophobia. If we just expose Islamophobia and leave Muslimphobia alone, the world will not understand, because they see Muslimophobia in front of their eyes. Not only Muslimophobia, there are a lot of phobias like Christianophobia or Xenophobia, that, as like Ghalib Kamar said, that how he was treated, and all these racism and phobias are there. We have to expose Islamophobia. We all say that how it is coined and how it is used to fool the world. But very sad to say that UN General Assembly is not a cricket ground in Lahore where a fast bowler from Pakistan can use a tonic cap to scratch the ball and move ball it in swing and out swing the way he wish. This is United Nations General Assembly is a body represented by the heads and representatives of the countries. But this former cricketer from Pakistan, who fooled the people using the religion and won the election to become the prime minister of the nation, went to the United Nations Assembly and fooled the whole world to make them believe there's something called Islamophobia exists. Luckily, this fast bowler will be bowled out very soon. I hope he will be kicked out of the office. But anyway, he did the damage already. But still, we are a very small minority here, working hard to make the world realize that you are fooled. The world is fooled. Even countries like the biggest democracy, India, had its own representative or the head in the General Assembly. United States, Russia, all the world's biggest countries, they are not Muslim countries. They are there. They are not Islamist countries. They were there, but this guy still were able to fool. So if these heads of these countries and the leaders can be fooled, think about us, think about the general people, general public. So this is how the Islamic propaganda machine is working. They are very good at covering something and showing something else. There's a common saying, then when you want to divert the people from one topic, you create a new problem. The people will focus on. When Islam is being exposed, they create something called Islamophobia, using the sufferings of Muslims. Rather calling it Muslimophobia, they call it Islamophobia, and showing the real suffering of the Muslim in the Western world, or as Hina said in India, they market it. And when somebody like us go and expose Islam, we don't criticize Islam, we talk the real Islam. I don't think Harris or Ghalib or Maryam, we don't bring our own stuff and criticize Islam. We just read what it is there and what Muhammad did. And especially the Medinan life of Muhammad. So we just take the words and the verses from Hadith and Quran, and we read it and explain it. This is what your religions preach. Then they come with something called Islamophobia to silence the word. They're doing very cunningly, but very sad to say, the left is supporting. As Erin said, she faced some people while she was working in Finland. So this is happening all around, even in India, even in Sri Lanka. When you're talking about Islam, talking about the truth about Islam, which part they really don't want to hear about. They call you, they brand you Islamophobia, and they try to isolate you from all the avenues, all the platforms. They don't want you to be heard. This is not alone done by the Islamist. It is done by the left or the progressive. I don't know how or why they fall themselves victims to this. Anyway, I come to the story of Farooq. So I should thank you for selecting the date that Farooq was murdered. Farooq was not just murdered. He was murdered the same way Prophet Muhammad guided or programmed the murder of Ka'ab bin Ashraf. This is called Al-Taqiyah, or you can call it the holy pretending. I don't know how many of you are familiar or agree that Al-Taqiyah exists in Islam. Maybe it is explained or portrayed in a different way in the Western world, but there's something called the holy pretending. It is existing in Islam. You should go through the story of Ka'ab bin Ashraf. He was a poet, a writer, a literature. He was a writer. He was a poet. He was not a person who took his sword and went against Muhammad. No, he was writing poems and challenging Muhammad in the right way, using the freedom of expression. But Muhammad plotted to kill him. He had a meeting, and a companion of Muhammad named Muhammad bin Maslama. Muhammad bin Maslama. This guy, bin Maslama, decides how to kill this person, Ka'ab bin Ashraf. Muhammad gives him the guidelines that you can go to this person and you can lie, you can pretend, you can do taqiyya about me. Then Muhammad bin Maslama went to Ka'ab bin Ashraf, because Ka'ab bin Ashraf was a small tribal leader. He had his own guards and he has his own protection because he feared that Muhammad could kill him anytime. But he was not a warrior. He was a poet, a leader, tribal leader. This Muhammad bin Maslama went to Ka'ab bin Ashraf and lies about Muhammad. And he says that we are suffering from Muhammad because he is getting a lot of texts from us. He is collecting a lot of texts from us. We are suffering. Can you help us? We don't like Muhammad. This is what he said. This is the same way used. This is the same method used for the murder of Farooq. I was in the same WhatsApp group where Farooq was. Al-Murtad. I was there. We were sharing though the Park Strait divided Sri Lanka and India, we were together by the language Tamil. We were in the same group, in this ex-Muslim group. Al-Murtad and this guy, Munaf, he sneaked into the group and pretending to be ex-Muslim. And he came into the group and he said to the leader, Sadiq Samad, sorry, not the leader, the coordinator, Sadiq Samad, he said, Sadiq bro, I am ready to do the field work. I'm amazed that we just joined. That was on February 14th. February 14th, the day Valentine's Day, he joins. And he says, the first message, he says, hi, and may we all welcome, do the welcoming. And he said, by Islamists. Today it's very sad that
Rishvin, we missed a few things that you said in the last,
first team
in the
did the
last
murder,
30 seconds.
Yeah, Rishvin, there's a slight glitch being experienced on your side. Can you please just try leaving and re-entering the room? Rishvin, can you hear? Yeah, he'll be back in a moment. Just hold on. In Sri Lanka, as we all know, there's a huge problems going on, especially with regards to the power failure and internet outage. And that was one of the concerns he was sharing all the way. So he was not sure whether he will be able to join with us today, but fortunately he's there, and let's wait for a few minutes for him. He's back. Yeah, please go on, Rishvin. You are muted.
Where did I left?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, please continue, Rishvin.
Am I audible?
Yeah, there's an issue.
Am I audible?
Yeah, now it's fine. Please go on.
Okay, if you please, where did I live? I was talking about this murder, and all of a sudden I got disconnected.
Yeah, there itself.
Okay, when the first team did the murder of Farooq, the second team of Islamists comes into play. They used taqiyya, and some of them were pretending to be leftists, and some of them pretending to be the progressive. And now they try to portray this murder as a personal dispute. They are working hard. And this year, Farooq's remembrance was commemorated in Chennai, the capital of the Tamil Nadu. They tried all their best to stop it. Why? They do not want anything against Islam to be remembered. The commemorating Farooq's murder is not against Muslims. It's against Islam. Islam is the one advocated the murder of Farooq. And the murder was planned according to the way Muhammad planned the murder of Ka'ab bin Ashraf, using al-Taqiyya. Anyway, now I come to this topic of Islamophobia. They always use this one to silence us. In the West, where the Islam is not the majority, where Islam doesn't have the power, they use the word Islamophobia to silence the people. But in Pakistan, in the majority Muslim countries, they don't use the term Islamophobia. They don't want to use this. They have something called blasphemy. Either the law will get you, or the law is late, the people will look after you. It is the story in Bangladesh, and it is a story in Pakistan, and even in many other countries. Luckily, Middle Eastern countries, the law is kind of very tough. The people cannot take the law by any chance. So the people go behind the bars, and we know what happened to Raif Badawi or the others, countless number of blasphemers behind the bar in Iran. This was started in 80s, and when the government did not want to hear something from them, they simply stamped them as blasphemers. This was not started by the Iranian regime. It was started by Abu Bakr. When he took the regime in his hand, people did not accept him as the leader. He used these blasphemous laws, and Hulfur Ridda, the war of blasphemy, was launched by Abu Bakr to kill those who did not accept his leadership. So Islam is very dangerous. And if you take the Quranic verses and the hadiths of Medina, I can give you a list of 70 odd lootings, murders, rapes, kidnappings, and massacres done by Muhammad in the last 10 years of his life once he got the power in Medina. So once you say these things, you are not Islamophobic. You are talking the Islam. Those who call us Islamophobic and preventing us from talking Islam are the people who hate Islam, because we are talking the real Islam, and they try to show the world a diluted or the whitewashed version of Islam. They are afraid of Islam. They hide the true Islam and showing the fake Islam as Islam. But we take it from Hadith and Quran and we present it and they call us Islamophobic, and they try to use all the propaganda machines to silence us. We should not be silenced. We should fight against Muslimophobia, and we should expose Islamophobia. In a way, we should thank this fast bowler from Pakistan to declare it a deaf Islamophobia, because it opens the stage wide open and it gives us the chance to expose his hypocrisy and how this word was coined and why it is not a valid term. So we should fight it, and I thank the ex-Muslims of Kerala and non-religious citizens for this declaration of the International Day, and I'm happy to be part of this team, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rishvin. So we got a clear picture, and especially with regards to the way Farooq was murdered, I don't think many of the people know how exactly that happened, and you gave a clear picture of that. And that exactly is the reason why we are voicing against it, and we used to say the same thing over and over for the past 5 years. And still, we can see more movements or the believers coming forward and trying to whitewash it in a manner that to say that, okay, that was something that he deserved, and that's why he was killed. And to tell you the truth, even I was one among them a few years ago, when I was a believer, and I was the same kind of person who said the same thing, like, okay, he deserved it. But now I apologize for that, and I know that how the whole thing works. So let's move on to the closing session. Just before going to Dileep for the word of thanks, I hope to hear a few more comments from you, all the speakers from Maryam, Namazie, and all other people in that same order. So, yeah, please, Maryam, a few comments over this.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the very, very informative and really wonderful talks. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One is on the issue of the West not knowing or people being fooled. I think actually those in power know very well what's happening. And I think one of the realities is that I think Western government policy is such that they want to appease the Islamic movement by reducing terrorism on their lands whilst appeasing the political wing of this movement, let's say. So, you know, encouraging Sharia courts here in Britain, for example, or encouraging censorship based on accusations of Islamophobia. So I think it is very clear they do know what they're doing. They are appeasing the Islamist movement. And so I don't think it's a question of them being fooled. They know very well what the Islamic states are capable of. I know there's a section of the left that supports the Islamists, but a lot of these governments that have relations with the Saudi regime, the Iranian regime, the Pakistani regime, they are right-wing governments as well. And it's not just those on the left wing. In fact, it's right-wing in power that has this relationship. So I think it's much more nuanced than that. Also on the dilemma that Hina raised, I think it's such a big dilemma for all of us, you know, the reality that we want to be able to criticize Islam and Islamism, but at the same time be cognizant of the fact that there is so much bigotry and racism against minorities, including Muslims, not just in India, here in the West as well. And that it is a tightrope that we all have to walk. And I think Caroline Fourette has a very good quote where she said, you can't excuse bigotry because of fundamentalism, but you also can't excuse fundamentalism because of bigotry. And I think that's where our movement is key in fighting against both bigotry as well as the fundamentalism and the beliefs behind the fundamentalism, which is Islam. Finally, I wanted to say something about hate speech. I think I personally am not against hate speech, and I think that is part of freedom of expression. I think the problem with hate speech is that a lot of what we say is considered hate speech. And if you look at a lot of religious texts, actually that is pure hate speech in and of itself. And I think we have to draw the line where speech incites violence. And I think there's a distinction to be made. I therefore think that, we have to be careful in opposing hate speech. I think bad speech, hate speech, the response to it is speech that is not hateful, that is against hate. And I think that's the way to combat any form of hateful speech, rather than banning it, because it's much more nuanced than that. And a lot of criticisms that we make is considered hate speech. And finally, it goes to the issue that Erin brought up, and the fact that, you've got one of the reasons we're not seen as victims is because we are seen to be promoting hate speech in what we say. And therefore, it's very similar to the woman who was raped, and, people looking at the length of her skirt and blaming her for what happened to her. And I think, again, that is that line where, we are seen to be, it's victim blaming, isn't it? And that's why, I think, as we've all raised, it's a very nuanced discussion. The fact that we have to be free to speak, even if it's considered hateful, as long as there's no incitement to violence. We have to defend that freedom of expression, and the idea that human rights is for all of us. Refugee rights is for the non-believers as well. Human rights and free expression is for the non-believer as well. And I think this is the way to go about it, opposing both, and defending universal values and rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam. That was quite informative and clarifying a lot of things. So now over to Hina for your comments.
Thank you, Maryam, for that quote. That quote is actually very apt, that we cannot excuse fundamentalism or bigotry. And that sums up my dilemma very well. And when Erin was speaking about the victim blaming, that is something I could actually relate to, because I've lived in very liberal spaces. My personality, my thoughts developed in very liberal spaces, and I was able to leave Islam because of those spaces. But my journey was very isolating. I didn't know anyone. I thought I was the only ex-Muslim in the entire world. And even though my friends were very liberal, very progressive, I could not talk about this with them because I was judging myself. I was censoring myself in, anticipated judgment from them that, Muslims are supposed to be protected. You don't question their things. You just leave it be. And that was very isolating, despite coming from a place where we criticized everything. So I get that. That is something that we really need to combat. We really need to have these conversations. We need to talk about difficult things and subjects that are sensitive, because otherwise, what's the point? We're just all in our own bubbles. I think this is a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Hina. So now we have Faisal for your comments. So Harris, for your comments.
Sure, I'll just quickly make a couple of points. I think I didn't get a chance to make them. I totally agree with Maryam about whether they're being fooled or do they understand or not. Well, of course, I mean, you would imagine that people in those powers, but it's just a matter of not rocking the boat. Of course, people at the UN, they would know the discrepancy between the difference between Islamophobia and anti-Muslim bigotry, and I do agree that is probably because they don't want to rock the boat. They want to appease the Muslim community. They want to say, okay, well, you've coined this term, so we'll just go with it, even though whoever coined it, but they popularized it. So we just want to go with it, but they fail to make a distinction. But if you actually have a look at the actual resolution by the UN, where the only time the word Islam is mentioned is only when it's Islamophobia. It's actually about discrimination. Everywhere else it says about discrimination about Muslims. So even the UN is quite clear in explaining what anti-Muslim bigotry is, but they just refuse to call it anti-Muslim bigotry or Muslimophobia. They just call it Islamophobia. So it's just, I don't know, it's like being overly polite when it's not needed. Secondly, with hate speech, I think I slightly disagree with Maryam just a little bit, because I get that hate speech, it's easier said than done, that we need to draw a line of violence. Yes, someone literally has to say that go and do so and so to so and so group of people. Then you'd be like, okay, we can arrest you. But then hate can be spread a lot more subtly without saying without calling for violence so explicitly. And the biggest example that we all see is that how I have seen the rise of Hindutva. Some people say that Hindutva has always been there. They've always spoken along those terms. Yes, sometimes now they're becoming so brazen that they're explicitly calling for rape of Muslim women or calling them all kinds of insulting names. But even the names, insulting names, like they have a nickname for circumcised men, for example, and they just refer to them with that word, and we see that how it riles up so many people, and then it just creates this whole movement. So even though I agree that we should be adult enough that we can say hateful, what they perceive as hateful, even though it's not hateful really. I mean, because ideologies don't have feelings. And I think the clearer line that we can draw is that we should always be careful when we're talking about groups of people, whether they're Muslims or Hindus or Christians or whoever they are, especially atheists as well. And we need to tell Muslims that as well. The Kafirophobia is a real thing as well. They need to be careful when they talk about Kafirs. So whenever we're talking about groups of people, I think that's when we need to be careful. But when it comes to Islam, yes, throw it under the bus. And I agree with Maryam that people think that what we're saying is hateful. Now, yes, the definitions of hate speech and hateful is all messed up. But the last thing I just want to wrap it up with this point, that I think we also need to take responsibility for the words that come out of our mouths. I sometimes do become a bit antagonistic when I make fun of Islam, but I'm always very careful when it comes to actually critiquing groups of people or discussing their behaviors. Yes, when you're covering a news story that includes a person who happened to be a Muslim man and then he attacks a synagogue in Texas, how do you report it? You're going to call him a terrorist because that's what he is. But how do we actually tell our audiences and how careful we are with our selection of words? I think it does matter, because otherwise I don't want to see a day, for example, this big Islamic cleric, Dr. Ismail, was recently taken down by YouTube. Why? Because a Texas synagogue attacker used to listen to him. He was inspired by him. But I didn't find an explicit video where he actually ever said to go and attack synagogues of Jews. He never said that. But we all know how much anti-Semitism is in Islam. And then they talk about anti-Semitism from Islamic context, from theological context, and even the fancied up with academic terms, etc. But then how does it impact? I don't want someone, and then, for example, when this Christchurch massacre happened, it was traced back to some YouTuber, and even they didn't find any explicit call for violence from that YouTuber either. I don't want to live to see a day when someone does something really nasty and terrible and they say, I used to listen to Harris Sultan. This is why I spend a lot of my time. I spend a lot of time criticizing Islam in all its glory. I mock Islam. I make fun of Islam. I just any possible way you can within the realm of reason. I do attack that, but I, at the same time, almost same amount of time is spent condemning Islamic jihadis and also Hindutva people, and also not as much, but I do, my stance is quite clear on far-right white nationalist movements in the West as well. So I think that it needed a bit of clarification, but anyway.
Arif, I'm sorry, can I just make one point and just to clarify things? I think the problem with hate speech is very much similar to the concept of Islamophobia. And I think that's what the problem is, because if you look at legislation on hate speech, a lot of it is also related to criticism of religion in various national legislations. A criticism of religion, it's not just about people. And I think that's why it's like the whole concept of Islamophobia. It's conflating various things. And generally, it's the least powerful who bear the brunt of it, and that's us. Do you know what I mean? It's people who are speaking, and because it's considered hateful, And there are many examples of all of us being kicked out of here and there for being inflammatory and hateful and this and that, when we haven't even mentioned anything negative about Muslims. And I think that's why even this blanket thing, oh, we should be against hate speech, is not a statement we should make. And if we do, it needs to be with a lot of clarification, because there is an equation with what we say as being hateful. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Haris and Maryam, for making it more and more clearer. So now moving on to Irina.
Yeah, I would like to draw your attention to 3 comments that I think would kind of wrap up what I wanted to pass through. And yeah, so the first thing is the definition of what is offensive. Anything that you do not believe in is offensive. There was a time I used to believe in ghosts, and the day when science taught me there is no ghost, those are myths, I was offended. And because I was offended, I did not go forward to actually take revenge on anybody. That is what science is. That is what rationality is. We learn it every day in the science school. And as a scientist, I get offended almost every time, because if I have a scientific publication, my colleagues can go forward and just dissect, like they can give their criticism, sometimes disagree, sometimes like they can just go and say that this is wrong, this method is wrong, or this can be like done or something, my supervisors, and other people. So this concept of offense really troubles me. What is offensive? So if I'm talking about something that does not convince me, is all of a sudden offensive, I should stop talking about it. So then there will be no progress. So this entire concept of offensive, if something is offensive, we must stop talking about it. And specifically, if it is offensive to the so-called large number of Muslims or large number of Christians. No, that's not how it works. So for example, I remember this incident that happened with Nadia Murad, the Nobel laureate, whose tour was, like, support was cancelled by TDSB just because her story, her real life story, could offend Muslim students. This is like, it doesn't fit into my brain. How can people be that delusional to believe that a person's real life story can be avoided or silenced because somebody else will get offended? If we start that trend, there will be a day when, just like in Bangladesh, it happened recently, just for saying there is no science in the Quran, even I can be killed or imprisoned. This is dangerous. This is simply dangerous, and there is no end to what can offend people. You let it go, it will just keep going. There is no end to it. The second point I wanted to draw is that we ex-Muslims, as a minority persecuted group, have all the rights to tell our stories. And our stories are unique. The world have to listen, and they have to recognize the fact that ex-Muslims are indeed discriminated, silenced, threatened, raped, tortured, killed, and thrown out of countries. That's reality. They cannot turn a blind eye to that and try to guilt trip us that, no matter what we say, we have to be all the time careful. Of course we are careful. We must be careful. We know that. We know that either way, it is either our Muslim family or us. Muslims are our families, our mothers, my grandmom, my mom, they're Muslims. So our stories have to be told, and the world or the other side have to stop pretending that our stories do not matter, and somehow our stories will violate someone else's rights. They won't. They are not mutually exclusive. Anti-Muslim bigotry exists. Similarly, persecution of ex-Muslims exists as well. The third part I want to highlight, and this is specifically for Muslim children who grew up abroad and then later part in life, they maybe got discriminated, oppressed, or harassed by their own family members for not clinging to the values of Islam or leaving Islam altogether. Usually it is told, hey, that is what your culture is. No, oppressive is not part of our culture. It never was. Before Bangladesh was Islamized, Bengalis were very progressive. Bengalis did not have this tradition of stopping freedom of speech. So I don't understand how is my ancestors all of a sudden It became a part of my culture, that in Muslim culture, that is how it is. The girls have to be controlled, so we can't do anything about it. And I'm talking about some incidences where girls, they get harassed by their own family, the Muslim families in the West, and if they go to the police, they're not given the chance to get much, cooperation, because they say that is what your culture. No. So we have to also highlight it very, very clearly how we define cultures. What are our cultures and what Muslim culture is? The Islamists don't get to pick that, because Muslims come from different kinds of cultures. It's not one monoculture, I say. So these are the 3 points I wanted to highlight, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Irina, for that. Now we'll move on to Ghalib.
Okay, so Islamophobia and all this politics that goes on around it. I think again, it comes to racism again. Why? Because white man has a guilt. White man has a guilt that he has done so many bad things in the past, and he has a guilt, and now he doesn't want to be called a racist. And Muslims have done a very sneaky thing, that they have capitalized on this guilt. This is what they've done. This is what they're still doing, and this is what they will keep on doing until we tell them that you have to see the problems of now in relation to now, not with the baggage that you are carrying. Because now human rights or terrorism or all the other problems that go on in the world is not a thing that is limited to the white man. It is responsibility of all of us, all the brown and the yellow and the dark skinned and the white man. So they have to start thinking as human beings. And I think somewhere we need to do something, because in the West, they have capitalized on all the left-leaning parties. And, me and all of you, we are left-leaning. We are not right-leaning people. We are left-leaning people. We agree with the left on 99% of the things. Maybe there would be just 1% that we disagree with them, and that is related to Islam. So, though the numbers of ex-Muslims or the atheists that come from Muslim countries or from the countries that are the Western countries, it's a very small number. But I think we should start to make some impact. We have to be vocal about it. I think if we make the left understand, and the left also has a problem. The left's problem is Christianity, and they're still hung up on Christianity. They should just move on now. They should start to propagate the secular and liberal values that they stand for. Not their movement to this day, despite more than 100 years of it, still seems reactionary to Christianity. And Christianity needs to be criticized. Its dogmas need to be questioned. And we also do that. I do that. Being a Christian being an atheist coming from a Christian background, I do that all the time. And most of the ex-Christian atheists, because ex-Christians don't call themselves ex-Christians, so they do that. But the problem is that they have to reevaluate their perspective now, and they have to stop seeing Islam as an ally against the right wing or Christianity. So once they do that, I think 90% of the problem would be solved. And this is how we have to proceed. Maybe we are kind of a very different kind of movement. We don't have political relations at this point. We are not attached to any political party, or we don't try to invade into the left as the Muslims have. But maybe at some point in the future, we would have to do that. We would have to make the left understand, because right wing, I would never want to associate with right wing. Because why? Because they are bigots. And all those things, all those human rights, women rights, minority rights, they would always stand against us. And we would never be able to accept it. I wouldn't be able to accept their dogmatic takes on abortion or homosexual LGBTQ rights or these things. So I would never be able to align with them. So we have to make the left understand somehow that you have to come out of this shell, which was cocooned to protect you from Christianity. And you have to understand that now there is a new enemy in right now there. And Islam is the enemy of humanity, that we know, and it's an enemy of human rights. So even when they are in the Western countries, they tell their daughters and they dictate their lives, and they even honor killings happen in the West as well. So if you are talking about Islamophobia, and Islamophobia, you say that critique of Islam is Islamophobia, then what about the legitimate fears? The fear of honor killing, the fear of an apostate being killed, the fear of blasphemy and those things, the fear of insulting Islam, or fear of just saying anything small about Islam can get you killed. And this is the legitimate fear. I think if they emphasize on Islamophobia, we should emphasize on these things that are there, that people are killed because of Islam all the time. So we should emphasize more on these. More we emphasize on the human right violations that happen in the name of Islam, then we can tell them, okay, these are the legitimate fears that people have because of Islam. So I think this could be a way forward. It might take a lot of time, but when you are trying to change something, it takes time. It takes a very, very long time. Yeah. So thank you. That's all from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Ghalib. Now moving on to Rishvin.
Yeah, I would like to start from where Ghalib Kamar left. So it's about left. They have a preset mentality, like they are supporting minorities, they are helping minorities, and they have the preset in their mind that minority means Muslims. Okay, there are countries where Muslims are minorities, as India and Sri Lanka, and there are other few other countries. Well, you are calling yourself as helping the minorities, but you end up protecting Islam. Islam is not a minority. Islam is the largest second religion. It is predicted, and there are calculations and statistics that within the few decades, it's going to be the biggest religion in the world. It is minority. People are the minority, not the religion. Religion is not minority. But still, ex-Muslims are the smallest minority, but the left do not want to accept it. They push us towards the right wing. They push because they already have a preset mindset and the preset program. We do not fit into their narratives, their program. They are not ready to be updated. They still want to be in the same dark. So what they do is they see something is not fitting to their narrative, something they find something is not that they are not comfortable dealing with. They try to push us towards the right wing. They try to label us as rights. We never call ourselves right. We never move that way. But they want, because they think they are there to protect Muslims, just calling that they are there to protect Muslims, but protecting Islam. There's a very good example. I don't know how many of you can remember, like 4 or 5 years back, the annual convention of Islamic Society of North America was happening in California, in a hotel. Amin Nawabi Gada and other ex-Muslim went there with mics, and they were interviewing the people coming. There are Muslims. Even the second wife of the great boxer Muhammad Ali was there. She were kind enough to spend few minutes to talk to these ex-Muslims. And there are some other ex-Muslims. Even they would come to these ex-Muslims and talk to them and interact with them. But outside this venue, with this red flag, the communists, the left were protected, stay standing, carrying an AK-47 and calling that they came there to protect the Muslims. When these ex-Muslims, the very smallest minority, only 4 people, the 3 activists and 1 cameraman, went there, these people tried to chase them and shouting and tried to confront them. You see the difference? Muslims were ready to talk, engage with these ex-Muslims, but not the left. Left didn't want even the Muslims to interact with the ex-Muslims. If you haven't watched it, go to YouTube and watch that Atheist Republic video channel, I guess. It's there. So you can watch it. Muslims meet ex-Muslims meet Muslims or something. This is the title of the video. So you can watch it. Anyway, so this is one good example. So I don't know whether the left will update themselves or they will still stick into the books, written centuries ago, and still they will live into the same narrative that they feel that comfortable to them anyway. But I request, if you are left, just update yourself. This is the first thing. Second thing, this Muslims, we should not call the people who sacrifice their time and things to mislead the world as Muslims. They are Islamists. Muslims are the every ordinary person who believes in Islam. They can be a trader, they can be a normal businessman, they can be a normal labor. They don't care about what's happening. Just they are ordinary people, just they were born into the Muslim family and they follow it. Like we used to follow sometime. They are Muslims. But Islamists, they are the dangerous people. They manipulate everything. They are the people who do everything. They are the people construct things like Islamophobia, market it, promote it, these terms. They are the people create the jihadist. A single Islamist is capable of creating countless number of jihadists, suicide attackers. They are the dangerous people. So we have to address them as Islamists, not as Muslims. Jihadists, you all know that. The end product of the Islamists. Once they create and once they create their own production, that is end up as jihadist. Jihadists, we all know, but we should not confuse ourselves between Islamists and Muslims. Islamists are dangerous, Muslims are the ordinary people, that we are also fighting for Muslims. That's what we call it, Muslimophobia. But that's what we didn't call it, Islamophobia. So we should clearly know the difference between Islamists and Muslims. Jihadists already we know. And the third thing that I have to say is the next year, on the correct day, on March 16th, we should have a big program involving the politicians, the leaders, who they are the ones who should know the difference, where they were fooled, and the world should know. So that we have to start making some plans from now onwards. On 16th March 2023, while remembering a Farooq, we will have this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Rishvin for that. I was just about to say that the next 2023 March 16th event, how that would be. So just for telling that, I am thankful to you. So I hope all the speakers here will be there with us even for that event, and not just for 2023, for every year afterwards, till we see the world more beautiful and the way we are hoping to be. So now just moving on to Dileep for the word of thanks. And just before that, I just wanted to say a small thing that is about the whole ex-Muslim movement that is happening in this part of the world, that is the Indian subcontinent, that is Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So this area is now getting a little bit attention just because of, mainly because of two countries, that is Pakistan and Bangladesh. And now to that league, now India is gaining an entry, and the situation here is slowly transforming into a different manner where this is getting more difficult to live as an ex-Muslim or to live religion, and also all sort of problems are faced here, just like in an Islamic regime. So I wanted to request all the support from the ex-Muslim community all over the world, the international community, to help us to keep the momentum and to gain a bigger leap forward, so that we will accomplish our dreams sooner than later. So so let us move on to Dileep. Dileep is the General Secretary of Non-Religious Citizens and also the executive member of Ex-Muslims of Kerala. And by the way, I just wanted to let you know that Ex-Muslims of Kerala, they are having a nickname, and that name is EMUs, EMU. So that's how we are being called. That's the name calling that Harris was mentioning about, the kind of names being called to trying to make them look, to abuse them. Okay, so that's how we are called here, EMUs. So you can even address us like that in future. So what we have done is that we just took that as our brand, and we have made T-shirts and cups and everything, and we have put EMUs over that, and that's how we are using that. So that's how we take the kind of abuses they put forward to abuse us, and keeping it onto their face, so that they are not, now they are forced to talk about Islam, not about Muslimophobia. So that's not happening here. We are trying to stop that in a manner that, okay, let's talk about the subject. The subject is Islam. Let's talk about it. So that's happening here. So now, Dileep, please go on.
Thank you, Arif. Thanks everybody joining. Am I audible? Okay, thank you. See, we have the South Asians, at least we are joining together for combating this Islam or that Islamic terrorism that we can say. But the thing what we have interested me is to give a vote of thanks. But let me talk about few words about in my life what happened. So I have born to an atheist father. My father was studied 12 years in a madrasa for Islam studies, and later on he converted into an atheist. Then I just got married, and I did just too much religious, and did 45 Umrah and 3 Hajj. And then, okay, I got it. This is a foolery, and I got out. And like that, so see, the people are coming out of this fooleries because later on, now I know that this even the existence of Muhammad itself is questioned, and plus, and this Rishvin Khilafat, it's itself questioned. There is no existence. There's no scientific evidence for the existence of Muhammad, or so just take a purported story for the people. The people are going behind this fooleries, and so seeing this Islamists or any other religious people, what we are thinking they are just foolishness or something like that. But we cannot ignore like that, because this Islam, it is exist. This is exist, or the Christianity, this exist. It's a social, the social fabric or social science. It is exist. So we have to live it, or we have to get away from that. And coming to the point, see, Islam is a religious practice or not? That see, everybody is saying it's just a religious practice like any other religions. It is not like that. It is just 1 second. It is just like another. It is not a religion itself. Once, sorry for the disturbance. Horror. It is a horror within and terror outside. It's literally like that. See, even for me, I have experienced after quitting this. I am saying that this is a foolishness. I am quitting from family. But the people who literally told me, okay, you left the religion and like that. I told you, do it what you want. You want to kill me, kill me. Then that kind of ferociousness has to come from us. We have to fight them. Then only we will survive. 1 second. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Arif Hussain. Arif is our president, and both in NRC as well as because he's a boldness. Boldness means we are literally fighting with our life to get on this, because some with some social conscious. So every day.
I think he's getting a call in between. So just hang on for a minute.
Yeah. Okay. And the second thing is, Arif has clearly explained while we are discussing on this point on this Islamophobia and Muslimophobia, and both got how it has got why we should differentiate this from that one. So, but coming to the point, the Islamophobia is the more because that is something what the UN is saying, that while saying this one, African National Congress, why they are declaring it as a terrorist or this kind of something foolishness they will say like that. They simply said this is Islamophobia. It is existing, something like that. That's we have to forget it. And then that. So I am coming to Arif. He's given a good explanation how what has happened and what is about our Farooq and what has happened to him. Then coming to Maryam Namazie, how she is fighting from their country and how it is that she has clearly explained that more than what is something news to me. Some information, everything is news to us or everybody. And then coming to then Hina, how that she explained how the India, how it is happening, the North India, she explained about what is actually happening behind the that is Muslimophobia. Okay, I think that is about how it is happening, but is the Arabic words or the Urdu words, something like that. But it is because it will happen. It will happen. But we have to fight it with the anti that Muslimophobia way. And the Faisal CK also explained about the historical, how the Islam has come up with the historical fighting, how for the long years. And this Haris Sultan, he's also explained the printing press, how this printing press has been clearly cleared of this Christianity and the Christianity monopoly in the world. And now this similarly, I compare the social media has come to eliminate Islam from the world. So now the Erin and she's also about the Bangladesh, how this the science, even the scientist. See, what is a scientist? He cannot express their words. If we are a scientist, they are converting into an atheist. This is what is very, very, very bad in the offense for humanity itself. Then the Ghalib Kamar, how the Pakistan that beaten up with the people, and this is why the atheists and the ex-Muslims are, because we need support. We need support from the all other area. And Rishvin, I know him and what is happening in the Sri Lanka, and he knows that the history, what is behind the Farooq and everything is explained well. And the whole meeting was very fine, and everybody has put on their points, and so thankful for everything. That what we are thinking about last few years or 2-3 years or 10 years, how it want to be, and we are reaching to that level. The whole world is changing against this Islamic atrocities or Islam. What it has to be, because it will be wiped out. Normally, that in 20th century, people used to say that at the end of 20th century, the 21st century will be the deathbed for all religions. But I think this decade it will be the deathbed for even the Islam itself. I think so. So thanks for everybody for joining this, and thanks for the at least our Asians or from Australia, and everybody has joined, and it is very, very thankful for joining. And the NRC and the ex-Muslims of Kerala will conduct again this thing, and please be with us, and thankful for all people joined. Thanks everybody.
So thank you everyone, Maryam, Haris, Irina, Ghalib, Rishvin, and just reminding you that 2 people from here, Rishvin and myself, will be troubling you over and over for more programs like this. Just be with us. It's a request. So we need to take this forward. So thank you so much. Yes. Bye-bye.